The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood polish, damp coats, and burnt coffee, the scent of too many lives judged too quickly. At the defendant's table stood a man who barely seemed awake to the world around him. His jacket was threadbare, sleeves frayed. A patchy, graying beard covered a face weathered by sun and time. Deep lines etched his cheeks, telling silent stories no one cared to hear. Daniel "Danny" Cole. Age, 72. Status, homeless. Charge, trespassing and petty theft. He stood hunched, but not from fear, from years. Years of sleeping on cold benches, of walking on knees that should have given out long ago. A young bailiff barely glanced at him as he entered. Another case, another waste of time, another man who'd failed himself. The public defender sat 2 feet away, flipping through Danny's thin file like it already bored him. They hadn't even spoken yet. Not really. Just, don't worry, I'll try to get it reduced. The gallery whispered behind him. Another homeless guy clogging the courts, probably faking that limp. Bet he smells like the gutter. Danny heard them. He always did. Years ago, he'd learned to hold their judgment, like he once held the weight of his rucksack. Heavy, but survivable. At the bench sat Judge Raymond Keller, mid-60s, gray at the temples. His black robes rested neatly, but his sharp eyes looked a little distant, tired, as if he'd presided over too many lives like Danny's. But no one noticed the nameplate in front of him. Honorable Raymond Keller, United States Army Judge Advocate General's Corps, retired. No one noticed how, as he reviewed Danny's file, his brow creased. A flicker of something passed over his face. Recognition? Memory? No one cared. The prosecutor adjusted his tie, ready for a quick victory. This was open and shut. Society had already convicted Danny long before today. But what they didn't know, what none of them wanted to know, was that this wasn't just another homeless man standing trial. And this wouldn't be just another sentencing. What they all missed was that this was no ordinary case. And Danny Cole was no ordinary man. The prosecutor stood without ceremony. Your Honor, the case is straightforward. His voice was sharp, efficient, the kind used to clear dockets quickly. The defendant, Daniel Joseph Cole, was apprehended at Parkview Pharmacy, attempting to steal over-the-counter medical supplies. When confronted by store security, he resisted. This marks his 3rd offense in 12 months. He paused, letting the words settle like a hammer strike. Given the pattern of behavior and his status as a transient with no known employment or permanent residence, the state recommends the maximum sentence. Danny remained silent. He kept his eyes low, not out of shame, but from exhaustion. His hands rested on the table, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the cold and the nerve damage that had crept into his body over the years. The young public defender barely looked up from his notes. Your Honor, while my client's actions were regrettable, they stem from poverty and medical need. He was attempting to procure supplies for personal health issues. We ask for leniency. The gallery rustled with soft laughter. Someone whispered, yeah, right. Health issues. Bet he just wanted drugs. The prosecutor smiled faintly, confident. Your Honor, this is not a case of desperation. It's a repeat offender taking advantage of the system. The state stands by its recommendation. Judge Keller glanced at the file again. His brow furrowed deeper. His fingers tapped once on the bench, a small, sharp sound that silenced the gallery. Mr. Cole, the judge said, please confirm your full name for the record. Danny rose slowly. His knees cracked audibly in the silent courtroom. Daniel Joseph Cole, sir. The prosecutor prepared his closing statement. The public defender gathered his papers, ready to accept whatever sentence came. But the judge's eyes had stopped on the name written at the top of the file. Daniel Joseph Cole. Something stirred in Judge Keller's expression, something no one else seemed to notice. Proceed, he ordered quietly, though his voice had taken on a new weight. The prosecutor straightened his tie. sensing no resistance from the defense or the bench. As the defendant has confirmed his identity, and considering his prior convictions, the state again requests the maximum sentence allowable for repeated theft and trespassing. Mr. Cole has shown no intention of rehabilitation, no employment efforts, no permanent residence. He continues to be a burden on the community and a potential threat to local businesses. The young public defender nodded without speaking. His silence spoke volumes. Danny had no advocate today, no champion, just a court waiting to process him like paperwork. As the prosecutor spoke, the courtroom gallery whispered louder. 3 offenses? Lock him up already. I don't want guys like that near my kids. Probably pretending to be sick or disabled. The bailiff leaned down toward Danny. His voice was low, but sharp. Might want to beg for leniency, old man, before they throw the book at you? Danny didn't respond. He kept his eyes on the floor, not because he was beaten, but because he had learned long ago that arguing with those who had already judged him was a waste of breath. From the gallery, a young man near the back smirked. Another homeless vet? Yeah, sure. Everyone's a hero when they're in trouble. His friend chuckled. Judge Keller's fingers gripped the edge of the bench. He glanced at the court officer standing by the door. Mr. Cole, the judge said, his voice cutting through the noise. Your file states you have no current address. Where have you been living? Danny took a breath. Under the 9th Street Bridge, sir. A few people in the gallery shook their heads in disgust. That explains the smell, someone muttered. The prosecutor continued, confident. Your Honor, given the defendant's lack of ties to the community and his repeated offenses, we ask the court to impose the maximum sentence without delay. Judge Keller didn't respond immediately. He glanced back at the name on the file, Daniel Joseph Cole. His lips moved silently, repeating the name to himself. Cole, 2nd Battalion, Iron Vow. His eyes darkened. The air shifted. State your full name once more for the record. Danny raised his head, his eyes clearer now than they had been all morning. Daniel Joseph Cole, Master Sergeant, retired. The gallery went still. The prosecutor's pen froze over his notepad. He looked up, confused, but dismissed the title as irrelevant. Military service, while honorable, does not exempt a person from the law, Your Honor. The young man in the gallery who had mocked Danny leaned over to his friend. Master Sergeant, that's probably just something he says to get sympathy. The judge didn't react to the comments. He leaned forward slightly. His gaze locked on Danny. Which unit? Danny's voice was steady now, carrying a quiet authority that none of them had heard before. 2nd Battalion, Operation Iron Vow, Afghanistan. A woman in the gallery gasped softly. Her husband reached for her hand. Iron Vow, he whispered, recognition dawning in his eyes. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, with all due respect, the defendant's military history is not material to these charges. But Judge Keller's eyes had changed. That's for me to decide. He leaned back, a shadow passing across his face. His fingers rested on the bench, but his mind had traveled far from the courtroom. Iron Vow, he repeated quietly. The bailiff stepped forward, sensing the tension. Your Honor, should I proceed with the next case while this is clarified? Judge Keller didn't answer. Instead, he stood, slowly, deliberately, something judges almost never did once court was in session. Mr. Cole, do you remember Lieutenant Keller? Convoy Bravo, October 12th, 2003. Danny's eyes narrowed, searching the judge's face. You were pinned down in Sector 4. We pulled you out. The courtroom fell utterly silent. The whispers stopped. The prosecutor's confidence drained from his expression. Judge Keller nodded once. You didn't just pull me out. You carried me 3 miles to the medevac point. You saved my life. The public defender finally looked up from his paperwork, stunned. In the gallery, the mood shifted. No more laughter, no more mocking, just stunned, breathless silence. The prosecutor cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Your Honor, while that's an impressive coincidence, we must return to the matter at hand. The defendant has committed a crime. His past does not change the facts of today. But no one was listening to him anymore. Judge Keller's gaze remained fixed on Danny. His hands, usually steady after years behind the bench, were trembling slightly. Memories surged, not dusty, distant ones, but sharp and vivid. The smell of burning metal, the weight of shrapnel in his leg, the sound of Danny's voice in the smoke. "Stay awake, sir. I've got you." "Mr. Cole," the judge said, voice low, barely holding back the tide of emotion. "Why didn't you say anything when this trial began?" Danny shrugged, his shoulders heavy with more than just his coat. Didn't seem like it mattered anymore. That single sentence cut through the courtroom like a blade. The gallery sat frozen. Even the young men who had mocked Danny earlier stared at him now, mouths slightly open. Judge Keller drew in a breath, steadying himself. "Master Sergeant Cole, I will not allow this proceeding to continue under false assumptions." He turned to the bailiff. "Clear the courtroom of anyone not directly involved in this case. Now." The bailiff blinked, caught off guard, but obeyed. "Yes, Your Honor." As people stood reluctantly and began filing out, the judge leaned forward once more. "Before we proceed further, I need to confirm something." Danny tilted his head. "Sir, were you awarded the Silver Star for actions during Operation Iron Vow?" Danny looked down, almost embarrassed. "Yes, sir. Didn't think it was worth bringing up." The last few observers leaving the gallery paused, eyes wide in shock. The courtroom door closed behind the last bystander. What remained was the judge, the prosecutor, the public defender, the bailiff, and Danny. The room felt smaller now, tighter. Judge Keller stood fully, his black robe shifting with the movement. "This case is recessed until further notice," he announced. "All parties remain present." The prosecutor opened his mouth to object, but the judge's raised hand silenced him. "Mr. Cole?" Keller said, his voice steady now, the weight of command returning to it. "Your service record indicates that you didn't just save my life. You saved the lives of 7 others during that ambush." Danny gave a tired nod. "Did what needed doing, like any of us would have." The judge took a long breath. "And after retirement, you spent 15 years training young recruits. Until the VA benefits got delayed, pension got cut, lost my home. Rest is history." For a long moment, no one spoke. The prosecutor looked down, the floor suddenly far more interesting than the man standing before him. Judge Keller turned sharply to the public defender. "Did you investigate Mr. Cole's background before this hearing?" The young lawyer stammered. "No, Your Honor. Standard procedure for petty theft. I assumed." "You assumed?" 2 words that now filled the room with shame. Judge Keller's eyes burned into the prosecutor next. "And you pushed for maximum sentencing without knowing the defendant's identity or history?" "Yes, Your Honor, but..." "No." Keller's voice cut clean. "No excuses." He stepped down from the bench, something no one could remember him ever doing before. "This is not just another defendant. This man is a decorated war hero, a man who risked everything for people like you and me." The prosecutor's confidence dissolved entirely. His face went pale. The public defender's hands trembled as he closed his useless file folder. "This case will not proceed as planned," Judge Keller said firmly. "In fact, it may not proceed at all." Judge Keller squared his shoulders and faced the room like he had once faced down an enemy line. "Prosecutor, your request for maximum sentencing is denied, completely and without reservation." The prosecutor swallowed hard, nodding in defeat. "Furthermore," the judge continued, his voice rising, "this court acknowledges that not only was the defendant's military service overlooked, it was disrespected. This entire proceeding has treated a decorated veteran as disposable." The public defender lowered his gaze, unable to meet Danny's eyes. "For your lack of preparation and advocacy, consider this a formal reprimand. I will also be reporting your conduct to the state bar." The young lawyer nodded shakily. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you?" Keller turned to the prosecutor. "I advise you to re-examine the standards by which you treat defendants, especially those who have sacrificed for this country." The courtroom was quiet now, not just silent, but the kind of stillness that comes when everyone realizes they have gravely misjudged the moment they're living in. Judge Keller took another breath. "Mr. Cole, I am vacating all charges against you, effective immediately." Danny didn't react at first. He stood motionless, as if unsure he'd heard correctly. "You will not spend another night on the street because of a system that should have supported you from the start." The judge's voice softened, though the command in it remained. "Furthermore, I will personally assist you in contacting the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'll leverage every connection I have, and I have many, to ensure you receive the housing, medical care, and benefits you deserve." Danny's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Years of silence had taught him that people rarely meant it when they promised help. But this time felt different. "Do you understand, Master Sergeant Cole?" Danny finally nodded. "Yes, sir." The bailiff, who had earlier sneered at Danny, now stood straight, his posture stiff, as if on military parade. "Sir," he said awkwardly, "would you like me to call the VA now?" Judge Keller nodded once. "Yes. And notify the Veterans Outreach Office. Tell them it's urgent." The public defender gathered his things quietly, his earlier apathy now replaced by visible shame. He paused before leaving. "Mr. Cole, I'm sorry. I failed you." Danny gave a slight nod but said nothing. Words weren't necessary. Judge Keller turned back to the courtroom, his expression harder now. Not the face of a judge, the face of a commander. "Let this serve as a lesson," he said, voice steady but powerful. "To everyone in this room, justice is not about efficiency. It's not about clearing dockets or winning cases. It's about knowing who stands before you and why." The prosecutor kept his head lowered. Master Sergeant Cole didn't come here to break the law. He came here because the very institutions that promised to protect him failed to do so. The judge glanced at the bailiff, who was still standing at attention. "Has the Veterans Affairs Office responded?" "Yes, Your Honor. They're sending a case officer now. They'll meet Mr. Cole here within the hour." For the first time in the entire proceeding, Danny's posture changed. His shoulders lifted slightly. His eyes brightened. Not much, but enough for those watching to notice. Judge Keller approached the defense table slowly. "Master Sergeant Cole, today is not the end of your story. It's the turning point." Danny held his gaze, years of pain and pride mixing in his tired eyes. "Thank you, sir." The judge nodded. "No thanks necessary, not after what you've already given." The prosecutor stepped forward hesitantly. "Your Honor, permission to speak?" "Granted. I'd like to formally apologize to Mr. Cole and withdraw my earlier recommendation. I didn't know." Judge Keller didn't smile. "Now you do." The minutes passed quietly. The courtroom, once a place of judgment and ridicule, had transformed into something else entirely. Respect, reflection. The doors opened softly as the VA case officer entered, a woman in a sharp navy suit, carrying a folder under one arm. She paused upon seeing Danny. "Master Sergeant Cole?" Danny nodded. She stepped forward and extended her hand. "I'll be handling your case personally. Housing, benefits, medical. We'll get everything in order, starting today." Danny hesitated, then took her hand firmly. Judge Keller addressed the room once more, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "How many of you came here today expecting to mock a man down on his luck? How many saw a homeless veteran and thought he was worthless? Another statistic?" No one answered. The silence was louder than words. You judged a man by the state he's in now, not by the battles he's fought or the lives he's saved. The young man in the gallery who had laughed earlier kept his head down. His smirk was long gone. Judge Keller's gaze swept across the room. "Let this be the last time any of you assume that someone's appearance tells the full story." He turned back to Danny. "You once carried me to safety when I couldn't walk. It's my honor now to help carry you back to the life you deserve." Danny's eyes glistened. He stood a little taller, the weight on his shoulders feeling just a bit lighter. The judge stepped back up to the bench, straightening his robe. "Court is adjourned." Judge Keller gathered his papers, but paused before descending from the bench. Instead, he looked directly at Danny. "Master Sergeant Cole," he said clearly, "before you leave this courtroom, there's one more thing." He stepped down again, unusual, but by now, no one dared question it. The robe brushed against the polished wood floor as he crossed the short distance to the defense table. Without a word, Judge Keller stood before Danny. His posture shifted from that of a judge to that of a soldier. His right hand rose, fingers straight, thumb tucked. A precise, respectful salute. Not just as a formality, not just out of protocol, but a salute between two warriors, between a man who once owed his life and the man who had saved it. The bailiff stood straighter. The prosecutor quietly placed his hand over his heart. Even the young man who had mocked Danny earlier stood, ashamed but respectful. Danny, slow but steady, returned the salute. His hand didn't tremble this time. His shoulders squared, back straight, eyes forward. In that moment, he wasn't a homeless defendant. He wasn't a charity case. He wasn't forgotten. He was a soldier, a leader, a protector. And he stood taller than everyone else in that room. The VA officer gently placed a hand on Danny's shoulder. "Let's get you home." As they walked toward the exit, the gallery stood in silence, not because they were told to, but because they finally understood. And the last sound in the courtroom that day wasn't a gavel striking wood. It was the quiet, steady footsteps of a man reclaiming his dignity.